In the 10th year of our marriage, Molly, the wife of a wealthy man, found true love and insisted on divorcing me. "I'm not going to let Calvin be with me without a proper name," Molly firmly stated. Truly loving someone means not wanting them to suffer any grievances. I quit my job and signed the divorce papers. 3 years later, I returned to the country with my girlfriend. My ex-wife and she got into a fight, and I desperately pulled them apart. My ex-wife was furious. She hit me first. "Then it must be your fault," I said coldly. "I love her, so I won't let her suffer any grievances." Molly tapped her fingers rhythmically on the armrest of her chair. She glanced at her watch, slightly showing signs of impatience. "You're late. I'm supposed to take Calvin to pick out a ring later." "Sorry," I apologized instinctively. There had been an issue with one of Molly's business deals that took some time to resolve, making her 20 minutes late. Her family had been kind to me. Molly's father was an old friend of my dad's. After my dad got kidney failure, her family helped find a suitable donor, which extended his life by 10 years and supported me too. Without them, I would have dropped out of school early and been forced to marry someone 20 years my elder. Her family provided me with good education, a comfortable life, and a broader perspective. So to me, Molly was my benefactor first, my boss second, and my wife last. Being Molly's husband was a job first, an obligation second, and affection last for me. Molly and I grew up together, childhood sweethearts. She's beautiful, gentle, and always took care of me. She always protected me from behind. As a teenager, I often imagined what it would feel like to hug her from behind. Would she be startled or happy? Would she hug me back just as tightly? At 18, I finally acted on those fantasies. But Molly told me, "Oliver, this is dependence, not love." But in the end, she married me because it was suitable for her family. I was raised to be a perfect son-in-law by high society standards. The night before our engagement, Molly's mom took my hand and said, "Don't expect love in high society. Women having affairs is normal. They want a decent son-in-law who understands." Having benefited from them for years, I complied. Thankfully, Molly never let me down. Unlike other socialites, Molly was virtuous and never pursued other men. Everyone envied me for having a loyal wife and a mother-in-law who treated me like her own child, even allowing me control over the company. I once thought years of effort finally brought me happiness. But at 30, Molly met her true love. Her lover shed just a few tears, insisting on a formal status, and she was ready to divorce me at any cost. Thinking of Calvin, she had a sweet smile on her lips. "You wouldn't understand. Truly loving someone is not letting them suffer any grievances. I'm not letting Calvin be with me without a title," she said softly, drowning me with her tenderness. "Calvin is the most naive guy I ever met. He doesn't care about my wealth or status. He just loves me. Oliver, I found true love. You'll fulfill me, won't you?" I chuckled, losing my balance, supporting myself with the table. Suddenly, I couldn't tell who was more naive, Calvin or Molly. She seemed unhappy. "What's so funny? You don't understand. Oliver, you don't know what love is." She was so earnest and resolute. Words were meaningless now. I signed the divorce papers. After the divorce, I resigned from all company positions. Molly frowned, confused. "No need for that. You're still my friend after the divorce. Whatever position you had, you'll still have," she said. Molly's mom also disagreed and tried to persuade me, "Oliver, after 20 years, I consider you my son. Molly might be causing trouble, but I won't treat you poorly." Her parents had a high society marriage. She spent her life as a rich wife, ignoring her husband's affairs. To her, it was normal. But I am different. I loved Molly. I foolishly believed that if I gave her enough love and patience, she would love me back. But reality taught me that love isn't a game measured by effort. Love breeds possessiveness and jealousy. I couldn't stay there and watch them flaunt their affection in front of me. I held onto Molly's mom's hand, her subtle sandalwood scent filling my nose. From 8 to 18, they raised me for 10 years. From 18 to 28, I spent 10 years repaying them. I'm an adopted son, Molly's husband, and company vice chairman. I played my roles responsibly. But now I am exhausted. I've never truly lived for myself. I want to be Oliver to live for me. I gently hugged her, my voice trembling. Mom, I'll come back to visit often. To be fair, Molly was always generous with money. She had a big heart, and over the years she gave me a lot, not to mention the shares and the divorce settlement. My hidden wealth was nearly equal to Molly's. After leaving, I decided to settle abroad. Molly, busy with Calvin, didn't even know I left. On my third day abroad, she called me. Oliver, you're so reckless, running off to another country without a word. When are you coming back? Don't miss my wedding to Calvin. Calvin says he wants your blessing. I gripped my phone, my knuckles turning white. I won't be attending your wedding. Molly didn't get it, sounding a bit accusing. Your family. How can you miss my wedding? Molly. My eyes welled up and there was a lump in my throat. Don't you think you're being cruel? Later, my younger brother David called me a lot. He was crying on the other end. Bro, I'm sorry. If it wasn't for me, she wouldn't have divorced you. It's all my fault for making the wrong friends. Calvin was David's college classmate. Because they got along so well, David brought Calvin home. Just that one encounter, and Calvin and Molly hit it off, their romance unstoppable. David was furious that his friend became his brother-in-law. He swore Calvin wouldn't have an easy life, making things tough for Molly too. On the phone, I chuckled softly, reassuring him it was okay. If Molly was destined to love someone else, then today it's Calvin. Tomorrow it'd be someone else. It didn't matter who that person was, as long as it wasn't me. I saw Molly and Calvin's wedding announcement on TV. Unlike our understated nuptials, theirs was extravagant and flashy. She must have truly found love, eager to announce her happiness to the world. The largest venue in town was covered in a sea of pink roses, with a guest list full of high society. The huge screens displayed diamonds in close-up, and the crowd cheered. Fireworks lit the hailing sky all night to celebrate their love story. Even international media were covering the grand affair. The world was coronating their love. I stayed alone in my hotel, curling up on the sofa with a warm blanket, lit a cigarette, and quietly watched the entire broadcast. I thought my heart would break again, but surrounded by so much happiness, I felt no jealousy or pain. At that moment, I realized I had truly let go. In my second year abroad, I occasionally got random calls. Nobody spoke, but by the breathing, I recognized it was Molly. After a while, I stopped picking up unknown numbers. David often called me too. He tried to show me how Calvin messed up and their marriage was rocky. Each time I'd cut him off. David, I don't want to hear about it. I'm only concerned if you're eating and living well. For a while he stayed silent. Then with a hint of sobbing, what about you? Are you doing okay? Am I okay? In my country, it's midnight, but here it's dawn. I looked to my side, seeing the morning light gently on her face. She breathed steadily, sleeping soundly. Linda wore herself out last night. I took her hand, interlocking our fingers. Smiling slightly, I told David I'm doing great. 3 years later, I returned. The company Linda and I founded was booming, and we decided to establish a branch back home. I chose a day when Molly would be at work to visit my uncle. Walking through the door, everything felt so familiar. Nothing had changed. The breeze stirred the wind chime I'd hung as a child, its tinkling comforting. His eyes were wet with emotion. His voice full of reproach, you ungrateful boy. You said you'd visit sooner, and now 3 years have passed. I hugged him, laughing, pulling out the gifts I'd bought to appease him. Glancing up, I noticed Calvin standing awkwardly on the stairs, unsure whether to go up or down. In 3 years, he seemed different from my memory. His hairstyle and clothing looked oddly familiar like me back then. David once complained, saying Calvin shamelessly copied my style. I had chuckled at that, thinking David must be mistaken. I nodded slightly at Calvin to acknowledge him, but he just fidgeted with his clothes, stubbornly avoiding eye contact. At dinner time, Molly rushed home, flustered and a bit disheveled, carrying my favorite roasted meats. She beamed brightly, speaking warmly as always. Why didn't you let anyone know you were coming? I could have had your favorite meatballs and jasmine incense ready. She tried to hug me, and I instinctively stepped back, pulling away. I was startled by Molly's familiarity and enthusiasm given how cold she was when we split. Awkwardly, she dropped her hand and scanned me up and down. "So, when did you get that tattoo on your arm?" she asked, pointing. "But I like the style. It suits you, makes you look even cooler." Her eyes looked at me appreciatively, and all I could do was smile politely. Calvin stood off to the side, pale and seeming crushed. Molly didn't look at him once, and I didn't get why her declared true love was treated so coldly. But that was none of my business. I didn't plan to stay for dinner anyway. Despite Molly trying to get me to stay, I said goodbye to my uncle and turned to leave. The new office is near Molly's company building. It's a property I got from my divorce settlement. On the opening day, to create hype, I used my connections to bring in a bunch of media. I didn't expect Calvin to suddenly show up. With eyes full of tears, looking both forlorn and stubborn, he shouted from the crowd, "Oliver, please stay away from my wife. You've been gone for 3 years. Why are you back? I can't take my wife thinking about you every day. My life is filled with memories of you. Oliver, show some pity. Can you leave my and Molly's marriage alone?" The place fell silent. My marriage with Molly was super low-key. Not many in the public knew I was her ex-husband. The reporters were caught off guard and turned their cameras toward Calvin. The guests were mainly from elite backgrounds. Many knew the scoop but kept their reactions composed, though their curious glances darted between us. I couldn't let him slander me like that. Besides, standing beside me, Linda was clenching her fists, clearly about to lose her cool. I picked up the microphone, speaking clearly and firmly. "Calvin, you should have evidence when you say something. If you can't prove I interfered in your and Molly's marriage, I will defend my reputation and sue you until you issue a written apology and statement. Also, this is not a marketplace. The loudest voice doesn't win. Please don't make a scene like a street brawler. It's undignified." Something must have struck Calvin's pride. He lost control. "Dignity, dignity. I'm sick of your dignity. Everyone after marrying wants me to keep my dignity. Saying I'm embarrassing, not presentable. Saying they love me, that's all BS. You rich folks think you're something, that having some money lets you mess with other people's lives?" Worried things might get out of hand, I signaled the security to escort him out. But the word got out anyway. Calvin's outburst video went viral. It wasn't until the evening that Molly's company PR managed to remove it from trending topics. On the phone, Molly's voice was tense. "Oliver, I'm sorry. I'll make him properly apologize to you. It's my fault for not controlling him. Sorry that you had to go through that. I hope it doesn't affect you too much." It did affect me, but I didn't want to discuss it further with Molly. Next to me was a woman turning into a pufferfish from anger, waiting for me to console her. I held the phone, staying calm. "Please handle this soon. I'll come over to apologize another day." "No need." I hastily ended the call. When Linda and I got together, she was a fresh graduate, a simple college girl all focused on her robotics career, clueless about family feuds in the country. She knows I have an ex-wife, just not who exactly. Now she's holding an iPad showing Molly's photo next to her face. Her eyes are teary, her voice hoarse, questioning. "Tell me, am I her substitute?" I just felt a slight headache. Linda and Molly do look about 60–70% alike. It was partly this resemblance that caught my eye initially. I should have clarified up front when we got together. Now it feels a bit late to explain. I gently shook Linda's arm, blinking innocently. "If I say no, will you believe me? Though they look similar, they're entirely different individuals." Linda is sunny, fresh, full of energy, her smile genuine and kind. Molly, in contrast, is gentle, respectful but detached. Her smile always seemed a bit insincere. Linda's eyes flashed with jealousy. "I don't believe you, unless you prove it." Grabbing her arm, I kissed her earlobe. Linda's breathing suddenly grew faster. She pushed me onto the couch. "Even if I am a substitute, it doesn't matter. It's not true. Anyway, the one by your side now is me. When a woman is filled with jealousy and envy, even the gentlest one might get rough." Lying by the bed, Linda calmed down, wrapped in a towel, handed me a cup of warm water, and started working on her laptop. The cold screen light shone on her sharp profile. Suddenly, I spoke, "You're very different from Molly." I didn't look her way, instead turned over, gazing at the ceiling. I didn't notice her stop typing mid-action. She might seem gentle and well-raised, but she's incredibly self-centered. She wouldn't wait for me to come home, wouldn't leave a light on for me, nor hear my pointless ramblings. I loved her for over 10 years, but she claimed I didn't know what love was, only to turn and marry some guy she'd known for just a month. When I divorced her, I thought I'd never meet someone who'd truly love me. But then I met you. Love is caring, tolerance, trust. It's your kisses when I get home. It's the porridge you make for me in the morning. I turned, propped against a pillow, my upper body lifted, smiling. Love is when we went grocery shopping yesterday, and the thing I just glanced at ended up in the cart. Love is you seeing me in your eyes, knowing what matters to me. Linda, I love you. It has nothing to do with Molly. If there is any connection. I paused. Linda stayed stiff, not turning her head back. I softened my voice. It's that she makes you shine brighter, more worthy of my love. Linda's tense body relaxed, though her tone remained fierce. You're really smooth with your sweet talk. I was sneakily watching Linda's reaction. She was talking tough, but the smile on her lips was hard to hide. How I met Linda was pretty normal. I had just moved abroad and signed up for a community college course to make some local friends. The apartments near the community college were pretty old, but they were close to school. I'm not picky, so I found a place that seemed safe enough and moved in. One day, coming home, I saw a tin dog sitting outside my door. It looked like a regular decoration piece. As I got close, the dog's eyes suddenly flashed electronic red, and it started barking at me in a mechanical way, snapping its mouth as it came running toward me. Startled, I kicked it away. Linda heard the noise and came downstairs from her unit. She was in a simple white dress and scratched her head when she saw me, looking pretty embarrassed. Sorry about that. Did it scare you? It's just a toy I made for fun. I forgot to bring it back in. Yeah, it did freak me out a bit. Not just the robot dog, but also Linda's face. In the sunlight, her smile was like a brighter version of Molly's. I couldn't help but turn serious. You're the neighbor upstairs? Could you walk a bit lighter at night? It's a bit disturbing. It wasn't a huge deal, but since it happened, I thought I'd mention it. Linda's face turned bright red. She bowed and apologized. Sorry about that. I'll definitely watch it from now on. That night, while I was cooking, she knocked on my door. With a big grin showing off her bright white teeth, she said, "It smells amazing. Mind if I join for dinner?" She was holding a basket full of high-quality fruit. I don't freeload, here's something for you. Closer neighbors are better than distant relatives. So I agreed to her joining for dinner, hoping to make a friend. Bit by bit, we grew close. One night when we were together, she confessed. That mechanical dog was intentionally left at your door. Handsome neighbor, since the first day you moved in downstairs, I was thinking about how to meet you. I watched her in surprise. And here I thought you were such an innocent girl. The next day, Calvin posted an apology video on social media. It looked like someone was holding a knife to his throat. He was reading from a script showing no sincerity. I didn't even finish watching it before tossing my phone aside. I wasn't keen on learning about Calvin and Molly's drama, but in social circles, it's a small world. You're bound to bump into people. So, to avoid being caught off guard like when Calvin suddenly approached me that one day, I sat down patiently and listened to David complain. Those two were full of passion at first, but they were from different worlds. David took a sip of his bubble tea and began his 2-hour rant. At the start, Molly liked taking Calvin to parties. People around them would give Molly face, tolerating Calvin's seemingly innocent but actually shallow comments. Over time, differences due to social class began to surface. Calvin didn't understand much and knew nothing about business. Molly didn't want to teach him either. She assumed any man standing by her side should naturally get it. Calvin had to figure things out on his own, without proper guidance. Pretending to know what he didn't only embarrassed Molly further. On top of that, Calvin's family was a bottomless pit. To pay off his gambler father's debts, Molly forked out at least 20 million. Once she started, it never ended. Relatives who weren't even close to Calvin kept hitting up Molly for money. What initially attracted Molly to Calvin, his innocence and indifference to wealth and status, turned out to be a lie. Was Calvin really indifferent to wealth and status? No, he just hadn't experienced real wealth and status. He maxed out a card with a 2 million limit every month, buying junk. The initial thrill faded, and Molly grew impatient. She stopped taking Calvin out. Once, Calvin secretly followed her to a dinner and saw some lively girls surrounding Molly, trying to amuse her. He lost it and caused a scene. He even pointed at an important business partner and accused them of cheating on their wives. Because of that drama, Molly became a laughingstock in her circle. David's tone was full of disdain when he got to this point. My sister has never been so embarrassed. She dragged Calvin out and really let him have it. Want to know what she said? David was animated, gesturing and mimicking Molly. We've been married a year, and you still can't distinguish wine glasses, and you keep making mistakes with accessories. Where's your head at? If you were half as good as Oliver, I wouldn't feel so embarrassed to bring you out. You can't even stay at home and reflect, and yet you dare cause embarrassment in public. Aren't there enough people gossiping? Your whole family are leeching relatives, living off me, and now you dare make a scene outside. Who gave you the guts? Molly was raised with a lady's education, so for her to call out a man like that was harsh. But isn't it kind of her own fault too? I set my teacup down, perfectly calm. They'll just keep living like that, a bickering couple. David pursed his lips, glancing at me, like he had something to say but held back. Just spit it out, I can handle it. Once, my sister got drunk and called out your name. Calvin lost it. David watched my reaction and, seeing no response, continued, I mention you all the time. My dad mentions you all the time. My sister mentions you when she's drunk. Calvin probably couldn't take it anymore. Later on, he started copying the way you dress. Probably wants to be like you, but my sister isn't buying it at all. She thinks he looks ridiculous just trying too hard. It's been 3 years since the divorce, and somehow, I'm still part of their games. Honestly, I'm kinda honored. I get why Calvin reached out to me. Having me, the perfect husband, around makes him look worse. He's blaming the issues in their marriage on me, acting like I'm the reason for their problems. But seriously, it's not my fault. It feels like being blamed for something I didn't do. David cautiously called out, brother-in-law. You need to drop that title. I stopped him, told him to call me Oliver. David looked really upset. I'm just used to it. Brother-in-law, do you think you and my sister could get back together? He sounded hopeful. I replied, sounding firm as a rock. Even if the earth crumbled and she was the only woman left, it'd never happen. Then, I felt a warm gaze behind me. Linda stood there, smiling, her eyes filled with warmth and love. You could have told me we had guests coming, she said, so I could have bought more food. That night, David stayed for dinner with us. Through all the lovey-dovey moments with Linda, he finally got that I've moved on. Before leaving, he suddenly grabbed my arm. Sounding a bit gloomy, he said, brother-in-law, you and my sister are both family. Even though I want you together, I really hope you can be happy. I'll bless your future. David might be on board, but Molly? Not so much. Linda met Molly while picking out an engagement ring. I left for a restroom break, and they were at each other's throats when I got back. 2 otherwise decent women ready to throw down. Molly's face twisted in anger. Why are you with him? Linda didn't back down, clutching Molly's collar. He loves you? Did he tell you he loved me for 10 years? Molly sneered. I thought Oliver found someone special. Seeing your face, I get it now. You're just a stand-in. I can't even stand to look at you talking about love. Linda's face darkened, and she slapped Molly. Molly looked shocked. Who insisted on divorce for her true love? Now you act all noble. I stepped in to break them apart, shielding Linda. I glared at Molly. Can't we just talk things out? 3 years and you're still quick to hit? Molly wiped blood from her lip and scoffed. Me hitting? Want to check the cameras? See who hit first. I didn't care. My bias was obvious. You probably said something to upset Linda. Otherwise, Why would she hit you? Molly let out a bitter laugh. Her face mocked me, but her eyes looked hurt. You just protect her. Huh? But I'm the one bleeding. Linda let out a soft hiss behind me, snapping my attention back to her. I asked, full of concern, if she was okay. Linda looked down, a bit pouty. I think I pulled a muscle. Molly, unable to hold back any longer, grabbed my wrist, forcing me to look at her. Look closely. I'm the one hurt. I pushed her hand off and stared into her eyes. Molly, do you understand love? When you really love someone, you can't stand to see them hurt. I returned her words, once directed at me, with the same detachment. Molly turned pale, completely taken aback. You love her? If she didn't look like me. Enough already, I said, tired of her arrogance. Linda, looking like you delayed things. If she didn't resemble you, I would have been with her sooner. Then I walked away with Linda, leaving Molly to stand there, stunned. I truly underestimated Molly's determination. Her business empire is vast, making it tough not to cross paths in the industry. So when she used the monopoly on raw materials to force a meeting, I had no choice but to comply. In a quiet tea room, Molly returned to her usual calm and polished self. Oliver, I spent 3 years figuring it out. My feelings for Calvin were just a fleeting passion. I'll divorce him. You can fool around with that young girl if you want, but eventually you'll return to me. She said our family misses me, claiming it's not complete without me. Pouring me a cup of tea, she said, come back to me. Time has proven we are perfect for each other. I couldn't quite grasp the situation, but anger quietly bubbled inside. I once wholeheartedly offered myself, only for her to dismiss it. And now, having tasted the drama and thrill, she returns when I've finally moved on, thinking she can reclaim me. Who does she think she is? Even a loyal dog has its pride. The tea was clear, fragrant. I didn't touch it and decided it was time for a heart-to-heart. You think we're perfect because I was raised with your needs first. If you smiled, I'd smile too. If you were sad, I couldn't even feel happiness. Back then, you were my whole world. Any woman would feel a guy who only has eyes for her is perfect. But time doesn't prove anything. My 20 years here couldn't compare to that 1 month Calvin had with you. Molly, I once loved you deeply. I don't regret my past. They saved my dad and gave me a new life. I'll still visit my dad and brother often, but we'll just be strangers from now on. Molly turned pale and said hoarsely, I don't want to be strangers with you. Oliver, I didn't know how to cherish you before, but I regret it now. I know I was wrong. Can you give me another chance? She looked at me intensely, like she had some grand speech lined up. I love you, and you love me too. Don't you? I chuckled suddenly, feeling a bit helpless. When she asked for a divorce, her cold words tormented me in those long nights until I could barely breathe. I begged her, told her I loved her, and she shot back that love meant letting go. She wanted me to let her go to be with Calvin. Now, after I chased this love for 10 years, she casually throws it back at me. But I don't need or care about it anymore. I sipped my tea and told her firmly, maybe I wasn't clear enough before. Molly, I don't love you anymore. My heart belongs to Linda now. Molly forced a smile, still stubborn. That girl is just to make me jealous. I shook my head. Stop fooling yourself, you're not as important as you think. I came here to say, monopolizing raw materials isn't an issue for me. I just don't want our businesses to suffer unnecessary losses over personal grudges. Let's cut the silly games. Okay? Oh, and Molly, these past 3 years as you were busy with love, maybe you didn't notice your company's run by managers. I might not lose if it comes to a showdown. If you want to be my rival, go ahead and try. My company's rapid growth hasn't gone unnoticed by her either. My words stung her, and her face crumpled. She closed her eyes, hiding her swirling emotions. Do we have to take it this far? Can't we at least be friends? If she had asked me this 3 years ago, I'd say, if you truly loved someone, how could you just be friends? But now I say, nope. I don't want Linda to be upset. No reason to be friends with an ex. When I walked out, Linda was leaning against the car with her arms crossed, looking like she'd rush in if I was even a second later. She reached over and took my bag naturally. Done? Yeah, all clear now. This time was a free pass. Next time, I'll unleash hell on her, even if you try to stop me. Linda opened the car door for me, and I glanced at her amused. Ever since she learned Molly was my ex-wife, her competitive streak kicked in. She'd ask, "Do you love me more? Or her? Should we throw a grand wedding too? I want you to be the happiest groom in the world." I quickly covered her mouth. No need to compete over this. A small beach wedding is just perfect for me. She bit my hand softly, wind ruffling her hair. With a mischievous grin, she said, "We should totally send your ex an invite. Let her see our happiness." I pulled my hand back, playful punched her chest. "Old habits die hard." "Huh? You're quite something." Calvin and Molly's wedding was grand. Their divorce was just as messy. Uncle allowed Calvin into the family with the one condition: sign a prenup forfeiting property rights if they split. Calvin, blinded by love, didn't even think twice. Now, facing divorce, he finds he gets nothing. Molly was always generous with men. If Calvin played his cards right, maybe he wouldn't leave empty-handed. But Calvin decided to go head-to-head with her, teaming up with his gambling dad to prep a live stream exposing family secrets, hoping to ride the wave to internet fame. Barely 10 minutes into the stream, police busted in, arresting Calvin for extortion and theft. Molly sent the love of her life, her forever, straight to jail. But those 10 minutes of Calvin's revelations gave netizens enough gossip to last a month. Like, David and Molly are half-siblings through their mom, David being Uncle's son with his first love. And also that Uncle had twins overseas back in the day, searching for the other child all this time. Stuff I didn't know in 20 years. And Calvin unearthed it all. Caught up in this, Uncle locked himself away, refusing food or company. I brought him congee, entered the room. The warm lamp cast tired shadows on his face. In just days, he seemed to age significantly. When she left with our child, it was to punish me for choosing family interest over her. But how could I have abandoned her when I gave everything to protect our child? She misunderstood me. I was just afraid my family would harass her, so I stayed away. Later, I found her, and she told me our child was dead and begged me to stop searching. But I don't believe it. Deep down, I always felt like the kid was still alive. So I never stopped trying to find out what happened to them all these years. I sat by the bed, hesitated for a moment, and spoke up. "The person you're looking for, I might know who they are." The DNA test results were in. Linda really is Uncle's biological daughter. She and David are siblings. Even Linda was surprised. My dad never told me about this. The one who couldn't handle it was Molly. She went crazy, had a breakdown, and hysterically booked a flight to get away for a while. The happiest person was Uncle. He hugged Linda, who was still in shock, and cried for a long time. Finally, he shook my hand, smiling through his tears. "Oliver, after all this, we're still family." Before I married Linda, I overheard her talking to Molly on the phone. "Sis, which flower supplier do you trust? I want to order something special for my husband." "Hey, I'm asking you because you've been married twice, got a bit more experience, right? That big wedding you had was such a show. I'm just here to learn from you." Sure enough, the room was silent before I heard Molly scream on the other end. "Get lost." On our wedding day, David was my best man, and Uncle watched from the audience. While Linda slipped the ring onto my finger, I noticed Molly at the back of the crowd, staring at me. Then she left, looking lost. I turned back to the love of my life. I leaned in and gave her a kiss. "Linda, I love you. Thank you for loving me."